Chapter 7 is all about diversity in the workplace, its challenges, but then also its opportunities. There was a time even in my lifetime, where uh, the approach to business and organizing in the US pretty much assumed that most of us were similar. And to some extent, that similarity was assumed that uh, people in business were male, of white, sort of Anglo-European background, maybe from traditional marriages and families and traditional sexualities. Okay. We know, looking back, that that way of thinking about organizational life probably never was accurate, even if it was maybe more accurate back then. And it certainly doesn't apply to the current workforce in the US. As you look around you, you may feel different in some ways in your workplace. And these kinds of differences could be due to the fact that maybe you're younger than other people at work or older. Maybe you're a male, say, teacher in a school where most of the teachers are female, or maybe you're a male nurse in a hospital where uh, nurses are primarily female. Maybe you're a female worker uh, in an organization that's traditionally been masculine. Or let's say maybe the construction industry or something like that. You may feel different because of your religion, your appearance, your country of origin. More and more, we have the opportunity to feel different and to encounter people who are different in these ways and others. So, this chapter is about, given the reality of the diversifying workplace and the kind of globalizing markets that most organizations work in, how do we communicate in ways that maximizes the opportunities of difference, right? And but also manages the risks of difference. And difference, cultural or otherwise, can feel risky. We worry that we may not fit in. We may be fearful that we don't know what to say to somebody who feels different. Uh, it may be risky because we've heard about the group that we think this person belongs to and have yet to really learn what this person is like as an individual. So why would we want to think about diversity in the workplace? Why is it important? Well, first of all, most organizations really want to make decisions about things like promotion and the way they invest their resources based on evidence and merit, not bias or cultural generalizations about people. Um, we really want to value people as individuals, not necessarily as a member of a group, but often to understand an individual, we need to see how they're different from us, how they are actually an individual, not a member of the group. But ironically, in doing so, we may need to really listen to their story. We may have to come to understand ways of being in the world that are different from the one that we had if we really want to understand how each person is an individual. And part of what shapes us as individuals is our cultural backgrounds, our the color of our skin, and how people react to it. We know that organizations that learn and workers that learn adapt and grow and thrive, right? Uh, Dealing with difference is really about learning how you are similar and different, learning about other ways of approaching work or relationships. Um, and so organizations need us to learn and grow. And if we want to advance in our careers, we need to do that. Because workplaces are so diverse in so many industries, and most of us want to work in a work environment that feels somewhat harmonious, we need to learn to get along with other folks, people who are different from us. One way to do that is to just try to separate into your own group. But as we talked about in previous chapters, the interdependence that we have with our coworkers kind of makes that impossible. We need to learn to work with and get along with people of different backgrounds, both professional and technical, as well as relational. Workplace productivity, the research suggests, as we show in this chapter, can actually be increased when organizations really consider diverse inputs and benefit from diverse kinds of expertise and background. It's not always easy to blend those backgrounds, but we do know that generally speaking, solutions to problems are better when more diverse inputs are considered in a careful, critical way. And for that reason, diversity is important and figuring out ways to manage it are critical. And finally, differences lead to conflict. And we need to know how to deal with conflict, whether it's due to cultural misunderstandings or differences in values. So, for all these reasons, we have a chapter devoted to this question of managing difference at work. This chapter covers a lot of ground. Um, I'm going to synthesize a few important themes, and you'll see these in the slides of the chapter as well. And you'll see that there's some redundancy in those slides because the chapter makes the same points in a number of different ways. First, we can think about how we communicate in our workplaces when it comes to culture. And the text describes a variety of approaches. A kind of monocultural approach just sort of assumes that everyone is from the same background, that everyone agrees on core values and ways of work, and there's nothing to discuss. Ethnocultural approaches assume that one particular cultural group, way of approaching work, people of one particular background are superior. And both of those approaches fall pretty short in the modern context because they prevent us from learning and adapting, right? And it's not to say that the cultural background that you come from is inferior somehow. It's just that the modern workforce encourages us to learn and grow from other ways of doing work. So approaches that are more cosmopolitan embrace their own cultural approach and value that, but also value openness to learning and are open to the possibility that people who look different, sound different, come from different backgrounds, have something that we might be able to learn. And they may even find that that's an essential value in the workplace, is this kind of cultural openness and learning. There are dimensions of intercultural communication that we can adjust and control to make a diverse workplace less risky. Your book talks about a number of them. One is inclusion versus exclusion. You can explicitly decide to be inclusive in your approach to solving problems, to running meetings, to talking through problems. And you might do that to promote learning by yourself and learning by others. And it may also be a way, particularly if you're in a leadership position, of expressing your understanding that people who do the work have an expertise that really is unique because they are there performing the task. And we need to listen and learn from them and adjust approaches accordingly. A kind of parallel to this is that most organizations these days, whether it's a university like mine, a business that sells cell phones, a government entity like the IRS, all of these organizations deal with clients and customers and citizens who are diverse, right? So inclusiveness means listening to the needs and concerns of those customers and adapting, right? And that may be a good thing in a number of ways, but it is definitely good business in the sense that we need to learn what our students want, our customers want, how they're coming to us with expectations so that we can adjust and do a better job of providing whatever the service is that we want. So that sort of inclusiveness mindset is one of one of those dimensions. We can emphasize conformity in our organization, right? Or we can emphasize uh, the willingness to be argumentative in the constructive way, right? Conformity is here are the rules, here's the way we've always done it, and we're going to do it that way. Alternatively, we can say, here's the way we've always done it. Do you have better ideas, right? Do you have arguments that need to be heard? This approach values what we have in common, but maybe even more, it goes to great lengths to figure out what do we have that is different? Like, what are the arguments in our organization that we have not heard? Let's not paper over differences that are real, differences of opinion, differences of how we should approach our work, differences of how we manage our workforce, differences in the values that we bring to things like the benefits that we offer our employees. So, in general, what this section is saying is we can make some choices in how we approach communication. And some of those choices allow us to be open to learning about culture, to learning about difference, whether that difference might be due to gender or sex, age, generational differences. The idea is to focus on learning. When we are different, we're coming to an organization and we feel different because of those factors I mentioned. We have some choices. We can assimilate, which is basically give up our identity and completely accept and internalize the expectations that our organization has for us. And when people, for instance, come to a new country and they leave behind their cultural traditions or their values and completely accept the values and traditions of a new country, that is sort of total assimilation. Accommodation is sort of accepting some of those things, maybe the core things, but also preserving parts of your culture that you can. A more modernistic approach, an approach that values plurality, would encourage all of us to think about the cultures that we have um, and to make choices based both on the cultural values that we bring and the cultural values that we encounter, right? Um, and to find ways to be both similar and different in the workplace. Assimilation, while it sometimes feels like we're pressured to do that, can lead to a kind of loss of identity, um, and can leave us feeling deeply dissatisfied at work if we have to leave behind everything that's important to us. Accommodation is reasonable and can work too, but the question is how much do we accommodate, and are we being asked to accommodate like core values? And for you, maybe your core values are your religious commitments, right? Or um, the values you have in terms of the dignity of every person and how they should be treated, or another core value might be honesty and your ability to be honest at work rather than to pretend or uh, deceive people about what you're doing. We know from the research and just our own experience that in many organizations, some discourses, like ways of talking, um, uh, are privileged over others. And in the chapter, we explore like how it is that we come to be privileged, right? And sometimes we're privileged just because, like somebody like me, a white older male, has traditionally had influence in the workplace and sort of assumes that what he experienced growing up is normal and privileged, or should be privileged, right? When we look at how we organize, the way that we ask people to work and talk in our organizations, we may see that we're actually and often unintentionally muting people who are different, but maybe just as good. So just an example is, for many years in communication, we taught people to do business presentations with PowerPoints and a certain kind of structure, primarily maybe because that was the way that it was done years ago. And it seemed to be consistent with some almost ancient ideas about communication, the five canons, right, of the Roman orators. But we know now that there are actually a variety of different ways of communicating at work, some of which are based on stories, right, or anecdotes or vivid language that may not necessarily conform to those old ways of speaking, and yet they're very effective. And so what we see is that we've muted people who might not speak in that kind of traditional white businessman jargon, at least in some industries. And as we expand and open the possibilities, we hear other voices more clearly. And often those voices are being used in ways that are more persuasive, more effective with audiences that we need to connect with. So, as we end this chapter, you can think about your communication options both as a person who feels different and is entering an organizational culture that feels unfamiliar. You can think about your approach to people who seem different from you, um, and think about whether you want to embrace a monocultural, an ethno-centric, or maybe a cosmopolitan view. You can think about the degree to which you would like to accept difference and actually encourage uh, discussion of real differences in your workplace rather than encouraging people to conform and not really think about those real differences. As we apply the RNF, think about attending as thinking about your own culture. Like, what are the cultural values that you bring to the workplace? And sometimes we think almost about ourselves as if we don't have a culture, um, because it's just what we grew up in, right? I grew up in a blue collar family. It was white and Irish, and my family emphasized hard work, usually physical work, right? And conformity. Um, there wasn't a lot of tolerance for people who wanted to be individualist, um, people who were different in any way in my family. And so that's my cultural background. There are other positive things about my culture as well. Engage in sense making by talking to other people who are different from you. Share your values and see if they'll share theirs. We can transform the workplace, reduce the riskiness of all this talk by just listening and trying not to be defensive when we're confronted with difference and accepting that another person's difference doesn't mean that your culture is less important and less valued. And then maintenance means creating structures at work that allow people to talk across their backgrounds, conversations that are real about values and about what we really want from our workplace.